Are the tears gone? Jesus, I haven't cried like that in a theater since Toy Story 3. Hey, how's it going, everybody? Pragmatic Addict here. Thank you guys so much for checking out this video. So in this review, we're going to be sitting down talking about Clerks 3. So Clerks 3 is the final installment in the Clerks franchise. It is now a trilogy, closing the quick stop doors for good. So I heard a few things about this film upon release, most notably that this was going to be Kevin Smith's, yes, farewell to the quick stop, but also kind of like a very emotional, very personal, supposedly his most dramatic film to date. This film actually is inspired from Kevin Smith, and I will say, once you see the movie, it actually goes so much further than that. Like, this really is the love letter from Kevin Smith to himself. Holy shit, man. But, yes, so there was a moment in Kevin Smith's career, the guy who is the writer, director, producer of the film, editor, he also plays Silent Bob, where he actually had a heart attack and a near-death experience. And so the plot for this movie is that Randall at some point has a near-death experience, has a heart attack, and then when he survives, he has this epiphany where he's like, I don't want to waste the rest of my life watching the same damn movies. I'm gonna make a movie. So he decides to make a film about him and Dante's careers at the Quick Stop, which actually ends up pretty much being Clerks 1. Now, when I was saying earlier where, there was a few things, that, I was taking into consideration before seeing this movie, I will say, I was very worried about seeing this, because of, for example, Smith's most recent efforts, Yoga Hosers as well as Jay and Silent Bob Reboot. But, so for those that don't know, Clerks is actually my second favorite comedy of all time, right behind Office Space. And one thing I was talking about before seeing this movie with my buddy Tyler, because he's a big Kevin Smith fan as well, is we were like, well, the ending of the first Clerks and the ending of the second one, they were known up to this point for these Clerks movies to have these really powerful, really strong energy between Dante and Randall. It's something that, up until the second movie, we've known, okay, well, this is how it's going to go. And with this being, the third film, 14 some years later after the second one, being the last one, I'm just going to say, guys, the biggest thing I took with me from this film was the ending. But no more fucking leeway. Let's get into this review, guys. Also, I will say, guys, your boy does have the Askuniverse videotapes. Yes. As well as some of the Blu-rays. I don't actually have Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back in here. What the fuck? So before the movie actually starts, because this is a limited release and a Fathom presentation, we actually get like a little speech from Kevin Smith where he's like, hey, thanks guys for coming back and seeing my movie. Yeah, after Jay and Silent Bob Reboot, they were like, wow, you made a shitload of money. If you got one more to, bust out, send it our way. Only, smaller budget. I thought that was kind of cute. He goes on to say how, thanks for coming back to the theaters. Usually people don't get their asses in theaters unless it's like a fucking Marvel movie. I just thought that was kind of cute. Very Kevin Smith-esque. But let's get into the movie though, guys. Clerks 3. So obviously when the movie begins, we're given that classic Clerks treatment. Dante, starting his day at the Quick Stop, with a nice tune, though. This might be a little bit spoilerish, but I guess not, because apparently this was revealed at Comic-Con. Apparently, this was even released to the public. I didn't fucking know about it. I'm like, I didn't see this fucking scene. But the tune this time around, it starts off with My Chemical Romance's The Black Parade. I mean, we all heard a little while back that, Kevin Smith was going to be working with Gerard Way for the score on this film, like how they kind of previously worked in Tusk. But the Black Parade, I gotta say, guys, my theater went fucking nuts. There was hoots and hollering, there was boos, there was what the fucks, and I was just kind of there like, this is happening. But immediately, the movie felt very anthemic, very triumphant, and that was probably partially because of the Black Parade play. There are immediate callbacks and, references to, the Clerks films, which it isn't just, for Clerks fandom, it's just for fucking Clerks, it is what it is. But I will say, while it does feel like Clerks, at least initially, some of the characters and jokes, most notably Jay and Silent Bob, don't land as hard as we may all want them to. But once we're introduced to characters like Elias and obviously Dante and Randall, what I want to note for sure is that when I got the trailer, seeing Elias in it, I'll be honest, I was the most thrown off by that. I was not sure if I was going to be on board with Trevor Furman reprising his role as Elias. But I gotta say, I'm going to be honest, he was the first character that really had me going. He felt the same, he acted the same, he fucking sounded the same. He sounded just like Elias. And his chemistry with Dante and especially Randall, it's not as, comedic or even as raunchy as the second film initially. But some of that has to do with, today's time. Just the sheer fact that a Clerks movie came out in the year 2022. Whether that be that, some of the jokes just feel kind of dated, or just completely opposite, where they're kind of making jokes in today's time and doing modern day kind of references that just don't feel right. I mean, Clerks is obviously a franchise that, goes, with the time. Obviously Clerks takes place in the 90s. Clerks 2 takes place in 2006. And then, this one taking place in 2022. These are, realistic characters, more or less. They're going forward humanity is. But, again, it's the idea of Clerks, a Clerks movie being released in 2022. You kind of feel that when you speak it out. Now, I'll say this. When we get to the area where Randall actually has his heart attack, how the film transitions into that, it's actually pretty distracting in the sense of, it just feels kind of like a careless, just, shift into it. Obviously, the dramatic tone to it, as well as just, the situation itself, and how quick it actually, got to this point in the movie. Again, I know that this is a very personal story to Kevin Smith, but just regardless, not only did it feel, clunky, but there's actually some humor that's added to it that just makes it feel even wonkier. But I will say this, though. Justin Long in this scene as the doctor, yes, it's in the trailer, weirdly enough, he actually more or less kind of stole the scene. Seriously, some of the most bizarre acting I've seen from Justin Long since, I don't know, maybe Brandon St. Fucking Randy. But, aside from all this, I still think that in the end, the scene does do pretty well. Especially for a Clerks film. I think Elias, during this scene specifically, I do think that he is the most fun character. I think he got some of the more, clever lines that worked a lot better because of his type of character. The fact that throughout the movie, he still refers to Dante as Mr. Dante. Uncanny. I was not expecting it to work as well as it did. But I will say, I do think that, the plot works well enough. And I think that it works, a lot better in saying that because of the fact of, how personal and, serious and dear this is to Kevin Smith. But I will say this. This is the least comedic and, least raunchiest Clerks film. It even feels a lot different. Again, it has a very, serious, more, dramatic kind of plot. And again, just how quick it happens. There are comedic moments, but, it is still kind of a more down, more sentimental kind of intro. But going forward with this plot, where, Dante and Randall are actually at the point where, they're in the process of making this movie, there are a lot, and I mean a lot, man, a lot of fourth wall jokes in this movie. There's this one scene where Randall says something along the lines of well, I've seen convenience stores in movies, but I've never seen a convenience store movie set. And then Dante's well, yeah, who the fuck would pay to watch that? And it's ah ha ha, Clerks, I get it. There's a lot of that shit where it feels almost forced, but you're kind of you're kind of at an area where you're just because it's you kind of have to, you kind of have to. And then there's scenes where Dante and Randall are coming up with scenes, and one of them's that would never work. And it's like the scenes that they're describing are literal scenes that we've seen in the past couple movies. But going a little bit forward, I will say this now. The movie does kind of like switch for a moment, where I'm not going to spoil it, but Elias's character, he kind of takes this really bizarre and just fucking uncomfortable and really just random ass fucking like character shift. It's like his way of like, you know, coping with what happened to Randall. No, seriously though, going forward now that we're talking about characters a little more, Rosario Dawson, her character entry, easily the weirdest and just most off-balance piece of the entire film. She's brought in the most abrupt, most careless way, in the most uncomfortable setting, making just the most hand-tossed, fucking flip-floppy jokes. And I will say, like, overall, as just her character, the whole thing just felt off. It just felt like she was there because she was a big part of Clerks 2. Which, in a sense, I do kind of get, because the amount of View Askewniverse cameos in this film, holy shit. I think we might have gotten them all, guys. Which brings me to the next thing I want to talk about, is the segment where they're having people audition for this movie that they're making. Which I will say, it is very half and half. There's a lot of celebrity cameos that are going to, you know, get a lot of laughs out of people, get a lot of, you know, hoot and hollerings. And then, but like, you know, aside from those celebrity cameos and, like, you know, the character cameos of the Askewniverse, it was fun for what it was, but then there's, you know, this other lineup of just random people auditioning for this movie that are just kind of saying and doing whatever the fuck they want. That just, it left me having that feeling of, like, if you would have just left it with these surprise cameos and these character cameos of the Askewniverse, that would have been a fine scene right there. What the fuck is all this shit? But the characters of the Askewniverse, these cameo characters, I was surprised not just by how many of them there were, and not necessarily like how much they gave to the film, but for what they did have to work with, how well they did it. Not just as characters, but even as reprising their roles, man. But going a little bit forward, while Clerks 3 is its own movie, the film that they are making throughout the movie is, you know, Clerks. And what I liked about the film is that, so it's actually titled Inconvenience, but it's spelt like, you know, inconvenience. I thought that was cute. But the cameo characters, again, going back to the Askewniverse characters, it didn't feel like it was just for fan service. I mean, don't get me wrong, yes, again, this is probably the most characters we've gotten reprising their roles in an Askewniverse movie, you know, to date. I will say that. There's a lot of them. But they all felt like they actually had something to do. You know, regardless of if that was just a couple scenes or, you know, just a couple minutes, it all seemed to work together. And again, it wasn't just for fan service that we were excited to see these characters again, but it was like at times where, like, you know, I was testing that. I was like, oh, great, of course, another cameo. And then they did something, I was like, whoa. Okay, that scene, that's a good scene. But again, going back to the movie itself, well, yes, you know, this is a love letter, you know, from Kevin Smith to himself. This is a very personal meta story. You know, it is about, you know, again, you know, Randall gets his heart attack. Kevin Smith got a heart attack. But it is not just, you know, like where Randall's pretty much playing this area of Kevin Smith's life, but he is actually, you know, being Kevin Smith in a sense. I mean, there's a lot of quips from Kevin Smith, a lot of, like, you know, directorial kind of quips whenever Silent Bob does talk, like he is given those chances in the Clerks movies. And the movie that they're actually shooting in this movie is basically Clerks 1. Even, like, the plot of the movie is, you know, Randall is basically Kevin Smith. He gets this heart attack, and, you know, he's in this persona where he's making Clerks 1, which was the film that got Kevin Smith where he is. And I will say, you know, for the plot, I get it. You know, I get it. But, you know, sometimes these scenes that they were filming in Clerks 3, like for their movie Inconvenience, it was literally scene for scene. And it literally was just almost watching Clerks 1 again, except, you know, it was the quick stop and Askewniverse characters filming that movie. And don't get me wrong, you know, with that being said, yeah, that was fun enough and it was goofy enough and I was laughing at times, but just how much of it there was. I mean, don't get me wrong, Clerks is, one of my favorite comedies of all time, but like, I'd kind of like to see the Clerks threequel. I can just kind of go home and watch Clerks. Again, I get the story, but there was just so much of it just focusing on this. And sometimes it got really fucking carried away with it. And also, it kind of gets to a point in the movie eventually where, when it is kind of focusing on being Clerks 3, like that sequel, it started to feel like it didn't know where it was going in regards to being a sequel or really even knew how to be a sequel at this point. But I will say this now. It does have a tearjerker of an ending, yes. Again, this is the final conclusion to the Clerks franchise. This is, it's a now complete trilogy. And, like we've seen in the past two movies that their endings, they are very dramatic, very wholesome, very, impactful and kind of have a lesson. This one has that as well. And I will say, again, like I said way earlier, the ending of this movie is what's really going to stick with you. And I would almost agree that, it's kind of exactly where the ending should be. I actually thought that, like, when we were having this kind of ending, I was like, if the movie ended here, that would be the perfect note to just end it here on. But it kind of goes a little bit forward where it's doing, like, an almost like epilogue thing where it just feels really fucking unnecessary. But in the end, the movie is not nearly as, funny, nor is it, nearly as even, like, quotable as the first two. Like, this is one of my most anticipated films. I love this franchise. Again, Clerks is one of my top 2 favorite comedies of all time. And on the drive home from this movie, there wasn't really much that was actually landing that I was like, remember, like, oh, that was a funny scene or that was a funny line. It was just kind of like, what's gonna do it, I think I mean to say, is Clerks 3 as a whole. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't about, aspects of Clerks 3 or things that made, things that worked sometimes or memorable lines or characters, but it was what Clerks 3 really was. What it was in retrospect, how it was as, this conclusion, closing the quick stop, doors for good, as well as, yes, being, how valuable and serious and close it was to director Kevin Smith. Again, I get the plot and I get the film, it was kind of laughing at itself in a sense, but I just think it got really carried away at times. The movie was like 80% Clerks 1 and then like 20% Clerks 3, except Clerks 1 with everyone being like 40 years old and me not knowing which one was actually the better aspect of the film. Overall, guys, I'm going to give Clerks 3 a 4.5 to a 4.6 out of 10 with an overall mix. So guys, that is going to do it for my Clerks 3 review. Let me know of what you guys, thought of the review as well as the movie for those that are going to see it or have seen it. It is only in theaters for like a few days, again, at Fathom Events. The tickets do go a little bit, more pricey because it is more of an exclusive premiere. But I know that he is doing his, Inconvenience tour. So, maybe if you guys are planning to catch, a screening of it during that roadshow, whatever it may be, let me know what you thought about the movie when you guys do see it, as well as the review down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, sticking with me throughout this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take care.